I hate that I'm right. I really hate it when I'm right. So I know I'm a little behind on this trend. Um, this is going to be my Wednesday video of this week. But we're going to talk about it anyways because I can't emphasize enough how digital ID and all this government tracking online is going to end so disastrously that we are going to go through some kind of massive, I don't know what you want to call it, reckoning. I don't know. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's not going to be good. So, back on the weekend of what was it, the 20th, I think. Let me look at my calendar here. It looks like actually the 22nd. So this was published on the 22nd. Oh no, actually it happened on Monday. I could have swore it happened over the weekend. So they're saying the 17th. It happened like a couple weeks ago. Either way, I was behind. I'm behind on the trend. I'm sorry. I had to double check this, but it happened over the weekend. Where like a lot of internet services went down. And the reason why they went down is if you don't know anything about the internet, several years ago, there was this push to basically move things from, because, back in the day, everybody had their own servers, right? So there was this push to push everything to the cloud, and it was supposed to save you time, money specifically, manpower, all that stuff, rather than have your own servers and they would break and all that stuff. It was pushed onto the cloud. And, as a tech worker, I tell everybody that the cloud just means someone else's server. Okay. And that's really what it boils down to. Specifically, when we're talking about the cloud, we're talking about Amazon Web Services. Like, anytime someone mentions the cloud, instantly think Amazon Web Services. And the reason why Amazon Web Services is like that gold standard is because they're the host for everybody. And what makes it even worse is I just had a statement that I wanted to say, and right out of my mind. So we're all familiar with Amazon as the delivery service. Well, the thing is the delivery service is actually like a loss leader for Amazon. They don't make any money. In fact, they lose money. The bulk of their business is actually Amazon Web Services. That's where they make the most money. And that's because they're hosting all these big corporate entities on their web services. So, specifically, it says October 20th, which was Thursday. Interesting. And this was published on the 22nd, which was a Saturday. So they must have been talking about the 17th, but I could have swore it was like last week because I wanted to talk about it. It doesn't matter. Okay, we'll take this article as is, but I don't think the timeline's correct. Okay, I could be wrong on that though. So they get a little summary. I like that. I really wish more articles would have a summary. Just bottom line up front, right there. So it says here, a malfunction in Amazon's Northern Virginia data center triggered DNS failures that took down AWS on October 20th, 2025, disrupting major companies and services worldwide. The hours-long outage exposed the fragility of the global internet infrastructure reliant on cloud computing giant. That's really what this boils down to, is, again, you want to have all this stuff online. Well, what happens when a data center goes down? We talked about the government data center in South Korea that burnt up. That was their only data center. And it basically took the whole country down. I'm sure the North Koreans were watching in anticipation on that one. And now they know how to disrupt the country. You know, I'm sure that should they want to do something, they'd have to take out that whole building. And I'm sure they're planning on it right now. So then the question then becomes, okay, if that happened in South Korea, what does a country like ours look like? This right here. Generally speaking, when it comes to server infrastructure, and this is more just my own research, I could be more than likely wrong on it, but they tend to focus on the coast, and then you might have like a couple of central data centers, like Chicago, Amazon or not Amazon, Austin, somewhere along the central states, but they're mostly going to be on the coast. And the reason why is because they got the pipes going out the coast to places like the UK, Europe, China, that kind of stuff. So yeah, you have all that. Anyways, so we're gonna go ahead and let's read this paragraph, because this kind of will drive home what's going on. The internet was brought to its knees on Monday when Amazon Web Services experienced a massive day-long outage. What started as a routine technical failure in AWS's Northern Virginia data center quickly devolved into chaos, disrupting the lives of millions around the world. Now, keep that in mind. One data center, was a ripple effect around the globe. Banking customers were locked out of their accounts, travelers couldn't check into their flights, and smart home devices like Alexa suddenly went haywire. And considering things like, your thermostat is now connected to the internet, your fridge is connected to the internet, your stove is connected to the internet, your griller outside is connected to the internet, your dishwasher is connected to the internet. You want to do all these household chores, and all of a sudden you can't, because it can't connect to the internet for some ungodly reason. Your internet connection's working, so it's got to be something outside. Just saying. They call it the Internet of Things. I call it the Internet of, SHIT. That's a very popular subreddit that I enjoy. But my point remains the same, is what is it going to take for someone to finally say, okay, this is not a good idea? The whole digital ID thing, because they sit there and say, well, it's, on your phone and all that stuff. Well, what happens if you can't get into your grocery store because the internet's down? What happens? They want to do the whole, scan and go concept. Well, what happens if you can't use that because some data center in God knows where is down? I feel like I'm just screaming in the wind sometimes. And I know that things like cash registers and stuff, they're all connected too. I get that. Don't get me wrong. I understand and appreciate all that. It's just, I can't emphasize enough, where does this end? Anyways, so it says here, AWS experienced an outage due to a malfunction in internal subsystems that monitor the health of network load balancers in its Northern Virginia data center. This triggered DNS resolution failures that disrupted key services for hours. And what it boils down to is, they're not, all your information is not stored on one server. It's kind of spread out. If you lose one box, it can move over to another box ready to go, no problem. You just spin it up and boom, it goes. So what it boils down to is the failure was the network load balancers, which, if I recall correctly, now I'm not a network technician, so I kind of I got very limited knowledge on network stuff. I'm actually, I'm okay with it, not great. But it's to prevent peaks and stuff, the load balancers kind of smooth out the traffic so that way the computers can handle it, and then it sends it to the right stuff. Sometimes you may get a couple hiccups here and there, but It's supposed to smooth everything out so the PCs don't get overwhelmed, you know. Which if that's gone, then like it takes out whole clusters of computers. Whereas like if you just lose one computer, you'll never know it, you know. Obviously the technicians will know it, but you as the consumer, as the customer, will not know it. Anyways, it says here, Amazon says that systems have been restored, but the damage was done. Some experts estimate the global financial impact could reach the hundreds of billions of dollars as businesses lose sales and workers sat idle waiting to get back online. Hundreds of billions of dollars, all because of one data center. Think about that. That's a terrorist wet dream right there. And I'm probably going to get like taken down from YouTube because of that statement. That's just that. Think about that. You lose a whole data center and you're looking at hundreds of billions of dollars lost across the world in an instant. Anyways, so this wasn't a one-off event, really. Third major outage in 5 years tied to the AWS data cluster known as US East 1. That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's the third in 5 years. Wow. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Anyways, we already talked about AWS, so we don't need to talk about AWS again. If you want to learn about AWS, there's better videos than mine. Okay, so this is interesting here. The disruption originated in the company's US East 1 region, its oldest and largest data center. That's interesting. So it's the oldest one. So I wonder how old the systems are. Because the thing is, okay, so if you're not in tech, you don't realize this. But if you are in tech, you realize this. A lot of our systems are only designed for about 5-year lifespans. But the problem is because a lot of companies are so cheap, they push it out to 10 to 15 years in some cases. Like some of the tech that I've worked on was technology that was in vogue back in the 90s, early 2000s. Like that's how old some of these systems are. Like Sears is out of business, so I can talk about them. Sears, their registers, I think the oldest that I saw was 97. And they don't have USB plugs. Their keyboards were PS2 plugs. You know, like they were operating on a form of Linux. I don't know how old that form of Linux was, but like they didn't have like a real. No, they had a GUI system. They did. I'm gonna backtrack on that. They had a GUI system. It wasn't just text based, but it was still. Like it looked aged, and to get parts for them were a nightmare. You know, like if their register went down, it'd be down for weeks before I could finally get parts for them. You know, and I know technicians that had similar issues. Like the one store that I covered, they had a whole shelf in the back room that I started. And I would just rebuild their registers right there. And, you know, as things failed, we bring it back there and I'd see what I could cobble together and put it back out on the floor. And up until that store finally closed down. But like, you know, it wasn't just their registers. Like half their registers weren't even networked properly, you know, but they never could get a network technician in there. So like, it was just like half the store didn't technically even exist. It was so sad to see. I know that a lot of people have talked about how, like for example, Southwest Airlines, you know, they are constantly going down on, what is it, Christmas Christmas and Thanksgiving because of their computer system issues, and they still just won't update it. But again, it boils down to costs. Like, they don't want to invest in the money to do it, which honestly, that's so short-sighted because that stuff's just gonna get older. It's gonna get worse. It's just, when it comes to technology, it's always seen as a net negative to the bean counters. The problem is as we've seen with Amazon here, if the system goes down, it takes out everything. I honestly think that if you are reliant on technology, it should be like the highest budget line item on your spreadsheet. Like usually the CEO should not make a bonus until the technology department has what they need, because otherwise you don't have a company. I think of this stuff all the time, and I laugh at my own jokes. That's how sad it gets. But I see this it's gonna happen more and more as technology gets older. But again, the engineered life cycle of a lot of this stuff is 5 years. I used to tell everybody, when you buy a laptop, expect to buy a new one in 4 years. And that's 4, not 5, but 4. Simply because I really should use my left hand here. You guys can't see my right hand because the article's right here, but left hand. Okay. I'll start using my left hand. So 4 years for a laptop, not 5 years, but 4 years, because after that 4th year, like, they just can't service it anymore. You can probably get parts, but it's just going to take longer and longer and longer. And that's why I'm such an advocate of, like, if you can build it yourself, build it yourself. You learn a lot. Anyways, let's see here. Is there anything else? Okay, so here's... Oh, this is going to be fun. Let me close out. Can I get rid of you? Okay. So here's all the companies that were affected. Okay? All the companies. AT&T, Coinbase, Delta, Disney, Duolingo, Fortnite, HBO Max, Hulu, Instacart, Lyft, McDonald's, Microsoft Teams, Perplexity. I don't know what Perplexity is. Reddit, Robinhood, Signal, Slack, Snapchat, Spotify, Starbucks, T-Mobile, Uber, United Airlines, Venmo, Verizon, WhatsApp, and Zoom. So Verizon and AT&T is and T-Mobile. So all 3 of the cell providers, the big 3, were taken out in that outage. That represents what, like 80% of the cell network customer base right there? Fortnite, yeah, that's Unreal. So they can kick rocks. That's it's not Unreal. It's Epic Games. There we go. So yeah, that's whatever. But Hulu, which is Disney, and Disney also. So both Disney products were taken out. Lyft was taken out. Uber was taken out. I saw that. Instacart. So a lot of your food service providers and rideshare apps were gone. Zoom, yeah, okay, whatever. WhatsApp, yeah, whatever. United Airlines and Delta, so 2 of the biggest air carriers, gone. Think about that. Seriously, think about all that was gone. Including, and then of course Amazon's own services was hit. Prime Video gone, Ring, Alexa gone, the warehouse systems were gone. Okay, this is interesting. The New York Metropolitan Transport Authority, so the MTA, was gone. The UK's His Majesty's, not Her Majesty, but His Majesty, since it's a king now, Revenues and Customs website was gone. Think about that. That wasn't just America affected. The UK was also affected in this. I mean, I don't think anybody really got the message of, hey, what happens when AWS goes down? I think unfortunately what's going to happen is complacency is going to come back. You know, if I were all these companies, I would have a backup plan ready to go, but I know for a fact they don't. You know, we already saw what happened in South Korea. You know, half their systems didn't even have backups because they were too big. You know, how many of these companies can't back up because they're too big? That's a very scary thought. You know, and it's really easy to find this data center. I guarantee it. You could probably just Google where it's at and find it. You know, I mean, could you imagine? I don't want to put ideas in anybody's head, but could you imagine if that data center disappeared tomorrow? What would happen? You know, it was gone for one day. What would happen if they couldn't get it back in, you know, a week, a month, a year? I mean, obviously, you know, after some time, all that data would be moved over to different servers, but like it would be noticeably harder to use in certain places. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. I'm just some guy on the internet. You know, what do I know? Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, even though it's a little bit more doom and gloom, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.